Captain Jai-Ho Park stood at the bridge of the Earth defense ship Peacekeeper, his eyes fixed on the massive screen before him. The strange ship that appeared at the edge of their solar system was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was 3 times the size of Earth's largest vessel, with a dark metal hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Captain, we're getting readings," said Lieutenant Mena, her fingers moving quickly across the control panel. "The ship's energy signature is off the charts. Our systems can barely measure it." Jai-Ho took a deep breath. After 15 years of space exploration, humanity had finally made contact with an alien species. But something about this ship made his skin crawl. Its hull bore deep scars and marks that could only come from countless battles. "Sir," Mina's voice rose with urgency. "We're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast in perfect English." The bridge fell silent. Jai-Ho straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and Jai-Ho had to stop himself from stepping back. The creature on the screen was enormous, with scales that shimmered like polished obsidian. Its eyes were golden, with vertical pupils that reminded him of Earth's ancient predators. Sharp teeth gleamed as it spoke. "Greetings, vessels of Earth. We are the Ravagers." The creature's voice was deep but clear. "Your world has caught our attention." Jai-Ho felt his heart race, but years of training kept his voice steady. "This is Captain Jai-Ho Park of the Earth Defense Force. We welcome peaceful contact with other species." The Ravager made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Peaceful? How interesting. We have conquered 12 galaxies. Lesser species flee at the mention of our name, yet you speak of peace." "Every first meeting is a chance for peace," Jai-Ho replied, remembering the words from his diplomatic training. The Ravager leaned closer to their camera, filling the screen with its fearsome face. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain Park. Perhaps both. We have studied your transmissions, your history. Your species is young, yet you've survived wars, disasters, and your own destructive nature. You interest us." Jai-Ho noticed something odd. Despite its fearsome appearance, the Ravager was speaking formally, almost politely. "If you've studied us, you know we prefer diplomatic solutions when possible. What do you propose?" "A meeting," the Ravager said. "We wish to understand how a species so physically weak has survived so long. Our ambassador, Koru, requests permission to meet with your diplomatic representatives." Warning lights flashed in Jai-Ho's mind. This could be a trap, yet something in the Ravager's tone seemed genuine. He thought of Earth's history, of enemies becoming allies over time. "We will need to discuss this with Earth's government," Jai-Ho said carefully. "But I believe such a meeting could be arranged." The Ravager's pupils widened slightly. "You surprise us again, Captain. Most species either attack us in fear or surrender immediately. You do neither." It paused, studying Jai-Ho's face. "Perhaps that is why you survive. We will wait at this position for your response. You have 24 Earth hours." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. "Captain," Mena said quietly, "do you think we can trust them?" Jai-Ho looked at the massive ship on their screen, thinking of humanity's long journey to the stars. "Trust needs to start somewhere, Lieutenant. And sometimes the most dangerous-looking creatures can surprise you." He turned to his communications officer. "Contact Earth Command. Tell them we may have just made the most important first contact in human history." As the message was sent, Jai-Ho couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would change the course of human history. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. But for now, humanity had done something unprecedented. They had caught the interest of the galaxy's most feared species without firing a single shot. Only time would tell if this was the beginning of a new era of peace, or humanity's biggest mistake. Dr. Hae-Nul Kim adjusted her formal diplomatic uniform as she waited in the newly built First Contact Center on the Moon. Earth had chosen this location for the meeting, far enough from Earth to be safe, but close enough to show trust. The air felt heavy with tension as everyone waited for the Ravager ambassador to arrive. "The Ravager shuttle is approaching," announced the control room officer. Through the reinforced windows, Newell watched as a black ship, shaped like a curved blade, descended onto the landing pad. It moved with surprising grace for its size. Captain Jeho Park stood beside her, his hand resting near his ceremonial weapon. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Kim? The Ravagers have destroyed entire civilizations. Sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards," Newell replied, though her heart was beating fast. She had studied every piece of information about the Ravagers that Earth's scientists could gather. Their history was filled with conquest, but also with strict codes of honor and complex traditions. The shuttle's door opened with a soft hiss. First came two Ravager guards, their scales gleaming under the artificial lights. Then Ambassador Karu appeared, and Newell heard several people gasp. Karu was even more impressive in person than in the transmissions. The ambassador stood 3 meters tall, with scales that shifted between deep purple and black. Golden eyes surveyed the room with intelligent curiosity. But what caught Newell's attention was how Karu moved, not with the aggressive stride she expected, but with careful, measured steps. "Welcome to Earth's moon base," Newell said, stepping forward. "I am Dr. Newell Kim, Earth's diplomatic representative." Karu lowered their head slightly, a gesture Newell recognized as a sign of respect. "Your hospitality honors us, Dr. Kim. We have traveled far to understand your species." As they walked to the conference room, Newell noticed something interesting. Karu kept looking at everything: the lights, the decorations, even the simple plants placed in the corridors. There was genuine curiosity in those predatory eyes. The conference room had been specially designed with larger chairs to accommodate the Ravager's size. As they sat down, Karu's attention was drawn to the large window showing Earth in the distance. "Your world is very blue," Karu observed. "Our home world was mostly red and brown. We rarely see such colors in our territories." Newell saw an opportunity to build connection. "Would you like to know more about Earth's environments? We have many different landscapes and climates." Karu's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of interest. Newell had learned, "You offer knowledge freely. Most species we encounter guard their information carefully." "Knowledge shared can build bridges between cultures," Newell replied. "We believe understanding leads to better relationships." Karu was quiet for a moment, those golden eyes studying her carefully. "You are not what we expected, Dr. Kim. Your species is physically weak compared to us, yet you show no fear. You offer friendship when others would prepare for war." "Strength comes in many forms," Newell said. "Sometimes the strongest choice is to seek peace first." Karu made a sound that Newell realized was a laugh. Not mocking, but genuinely amused. "Perhaps that is why your species has survived so long. You think differently than any other we have encountered." As they began their formal discussions, Newell noticed that Karu kept watching the humans' movements, especially when an aide brought in refreshments. There was something about their careful observation that gave her an idea, one that might change everything. But for now, she focused on the diplomatic talks. This was just the beginning, and every word, every gesture mattered. The fate of Earth might depend on building a bridge between two very different species who had more in common than either yet realized. The third day of diplomatic meetings had been long and tiring. Newell sat in the conference room, watching as Karu paced back and forth. The massive Ravagers seemed troubled, their scales shifting between dark colors that Newell had learned meant frustration. "Your species is confusing," Karu said suddenly. "You have weapons that could destroy planets, yet you choose not to use them. You have the ability to fight, yet you prefer to talk. How do you prove your worth without combat?" Newell was about to answer when her personal aide, Subin, entered with her usual afternoon tea service. The young aide placed the delicate teapot and cup on the table with practiced care. Karu stopped pacing, those golden eyes fixed on the steaming cup. "What is this ritual you perform each day?" Hanul looked at her tea, then at Karu, and had an idea. "This is a tea ceremony. Would you like to learn about it?" "A ceremony?" Karu moved closer, head tilted in curiosity. "Like our battle rituals?" "In some ways, yes." Hanul gestured to Subin. "Please bring the complete tea set, and a larger cup for our guest." Subin returned with a traditional tea set, complete with all the proper tools. Hanul began to explain each step as she performed it. "First, we warm the cups with hot water," she said, pouring carefully. "This prepares them for the tea. Every movement has meaning, just as every move in combat must have purpose." Karu watched intently as she discarded the warming water and measured the tea leaves. The Ravager's scales had shifted to a lighter shade that Hanul recognized as deep interest. "The water must be the right temperature," Hanul continued. "Too hot, and the tea becomes bitter. Too cool, and it won't release its full flavor. Like any ritual, balance is essential." She poured the water over the leaves in steady, circular motions. Steam rose from the cups, and Karu leaned forward, nostrils flaring slightly. "The steam carries the first essence of the tea," Hanul explained. "We take a moment to appreciate it, just as your warriors pause to honor their opponents before battle." Karu's voice was softer than usual. "You show great respect to this tea." "Respect is at the heart of the ceremony," Hanul said, straining the tea into the cups. "Every culture has its ways of showing respect. This is one of ours." She offered the larger cup to Karu, who took it with surprising gentleness for such massive claws. The Ravager ambassador studied the liquid, then mimicked Hanul's careful handling of the cup. "We take time to observe the color, the aroma," Hanul demonstrated, like studying an opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Karu brought the cup closer to their face, those golden eyes half closed in concentration. "It smells like life, like growing things." "That's the essence of the tea leaf," Hanul said. "When we drink, we take in that essence. It's a way of connecting with nature, with each other, and with the moment." Karu took a careful sip, then became very still. The scales around their throat rippled with colors Hanul had never seen before. "This is not combat," Karu said slowly, "but it has power. There is strength in this precision, this patience." They looked at Hanul with new understanding. "Your ceremonies are different from ours, but they are no less meaningful." Hanul smiled, feeling hope rise in her chest. "Would you like to learn the full ceremony? It takes years to master, but the journey itself is valuable." "Yes," Karu said, still cradling the cup. "I would like that very much. Perhaps there are things our species can teach each other beyond the art of war." As they continued with the ceremony, Hanul noticed that the tension in the room had disappeared. Something had changed. In sharing this simple human ritual, they had found common ground that no amount of formal diplomacy had achieved. It was a small step, but sometimes the smallest steps led to the greatest journeys. Commander Du Yun Li walked through the lunar base's main corridor, his footsteps echoing in the early morning quiet. He was heading to observe the daily meeting between Dr. Hanul Kim and Ambassador Karu. As head of security, he had initially opposed these regular tea ceremonies, but Earth Command had overruled his objections. When he reached the observation room, he found Karu already there, watching Earth through the large window. The Ravager ambassador turned at his approach, scales gleaming in the dim light. "Commander Li," Karu greeted him. "You are early today." "As are you, Ambassador," Du Yun replied carefully. He noticed that Karu's usual guards were absent. "Where is your security detail?" Karu's scales shifted to a lighter shade. "I dismissed them. After 3 weeks of tea ceremonies, I believe we have moved beyond the need for constant surveillance. Don't you agree?" Du Yun felt surprised. Ravagers were known for never lowering their guard. "That's unexpected." Many things about your species are unexpected, Keru said. For instance, your martial arts. Dr. Kim showed me videos of these combat forms. They are beautiful, like deadly dances. You've been studying our fighting techniques? Du Yun asked, suddenly alert. Keru made a sound that Du Yun now recognized as laughter. Not to use against you, Commander. To understand you. Your species turns even combat into art. Like the tea ceremony, you find beauty in discipline. Hanul arrived then, carrying a large box. Good morning, Commander Lee. Ambassador Keru, I brought something special today. She opened the box to reveal an old wooden sword. This is called a wooden practice sword. It's used for training in traditional sword arts. Keru looked at the weapon with intense interest. May I? Hanul handed it over. Keru held the wooden sword with surprising gentleness, examining every detail. The wood is worn smooth from years of practice. Keru observed. Like our ritual blades, it carries history in its scars. Du Yun found himself stepping forward. Would you like to learn some basic forms? Both Hanul and Keru looked at him in surprise. Du Yun himself was surprised by his offer, but something about Keru's careful handling of the practice sword had touched him. You would teach me your combat arts? Keru asked. If you would teach us about your ritual combat in return, Du Yun said. Cultural exchange should go both ways. For the next hour, Du Yun demonstrated basic sword forms, while Keru showed them the formal movements of Ravager battle ceremonies. Despite their different bodies and traditions, they found many similarities in their movements. Your forms emphasize balance and control, Keru said, performing a slow, graceful turn with the practice sword. Like the tea ceremony, they teach patience and precision. And your battle rituals aren't just about showing strength, Du Yun realized. They're about honor and respect. Hanul watched them practice, her eyes bright with understanding. Perhaps this is why our species can find common ground. We both value tradition and discipline, just in different ways. Keru returned the practice sword with a formal bow, a human gesture they had learned. My people believe that knowing an opponent's battle techniques means knowing their soul. Today, I begin to understand that peace can teach us just as much as war. As they prepared for the day's tea ceremony, Du Yun stayed to watch. For the first time, he saw the ritual not as a diplomatic tool, but as a bridge between two cultures that had more in common than anyone had imagined. In the gentle morning light of Earth rising over the lunar horizon, human and Ravager moved through their shared ceremonies, each learning from the other, each finding strength in peace rather than conflict. The alarm sirens woke Hanul from a deep sleep. Red lights flashed through the lunar base as she rushed to the command center. When she arrived, she found Commander Du Yun already there, his face tight with worry. What's happening? She asked. 3 Ravager warships just entered our solar system, Du Yun said, pointing to the main screen. They're heading straight for the lunar colonies. Hanul felt her heart sink. Have you contacted Ambassador Keru? That's the problem. The ambassador's ship isn't responding to our calls. The door burst open, and Keru rushed in, their scales dark with agitation. I just received word. The ships belong to Ritu, leader of the war faction. They oppose our peace talks. How many people are on those ships? Du Yun asked. 200 warriors on each ship, Keru said. All of them believe that talking with humans makes us weak. They want to prove that humans should be conquered, not befriended. Hanul watched the approaching ships on the screen. How long do we have? 20 minutes before they're in firing range, Du Yun answered. Our defense systems are ready, but against 3 Ravager warships. Fighting is exactly what Ritu wants, Hanul said. We need another way. Keru's scales shifted to a deep blue. There might be one option. Ritu follows the old ways. They must honor a formal challenge. What kind of challenge? Du Yun asked. I can challenge Ritu's right to attack. But for the challenge to be valid, I need a human to stand with me. Both of us would risk our lives. Hanul stepped forward. I'll do it. No, Du Yun said quickly. I should go. I'm trained for combat. This isn't about combat, Hanul said softly. It's about showing them a different kind of strength. She turned to Karu. Can we use the tea ceremony? Karu's eyes widened. A peaceful ritual as a challenge. It's never been done. Exactly, Hanul said. Ritu expects violence. We'll show them something they've never seen. They worked quickly. While Du Yun prepared the base's defenses, Hanul and Karu sent a formal challenge to Ritu's ships. They requested a meeting on neutral ground, the lunar surface itself. Ritu accepted, probably expecting an easy victory. Their ship landed a safe distance from the base. When the massive warrior stepped out in full battle armor, Hanul and Karu were waiting with a simple table, 2 chairs, and a tea set. What is this mockery? Ritu growled, their scales bright red with anger. This is our challenge, Karu said formally. To share tea with humans requires more discipline than any battle. Will you prove your worth through violence alone, or dare you attempt true mastery? Ritu laughed. You waste our time with drinks. The humans have made you soft, Karu. Hanul began preparing the tea, her movements slow and precise despite her racing heart. Every movement in this ceremony must be perfect, she said clearly. One mistake shows weakness. Are you strong enough to try? She could see Ritu's warriors shifting uncomfortably. Their leader was trapped. Refusing the challenge would show fear of a simple ceremony, but accepting meant playing by human rules. Ritu's scales darkened. You think you can stop a war with tea? We think, Karu said, that true strength lies in mastering peace as well as war. Or are you afraid to learn something new? The fate of Earth hung in the balance as Ritu stared at the steaming tea set. The next few moments would determine whether humanity had found a new way to make peace or made their last mistake. Hanul watched as Ritu paced around the tea table set up on the lunar surface. The massive Ravager warrior had been silent for several minutes, considering the challenge. Behind them, both human and Ravager ships waited in tense silence. Commander Du Yun's voice came through Hanul's helmet radio. The defense systems are ready if this doesn't work. It has to work, Hanul replied softly. There's something about the Ravagers we haven't understood until now. Karu stood beside her, their scales shifting between deep blues and purples. You see it too, don't you? The truth about my people. Hanul nodded. During her weeks of studying Ravager history, she had noticed something important. Every Ravager ritual, every tradition, focused on showing strength and power. But why would such a powerful species need to constantly prove itself? Your people weren't always predators, were you? Hanul asked quietly. You were prey once. Karu's scales rippled with surprise. How did you know? Your ceremonies, your need to show strength, they come from a deep fear. The fear of being weak again. Ritu turned sharply, having heard their conversation. You dare to speak of weakness. I speak of history, Hanul said calmly, beginning to prepare the tea. Humans understand what it means to rise from weakness to strength. Our ancestors were prey too. We survived by learning, by growing, by finding new kinds of strength. Ritu moved closer, their golden eyes fixed on Hanul's hands as she measured the tea leaves. You know nothing of our past. I know that your people fought their way from the bottom of the food chain to the top. Hanul continued, her movements precise and careful. You became strong through combat and conquest. But there are other ways to be strong. Karu stepped forward. Look at how she handles the tea, Ritu. Every movement must be perfect. One mistake, and the ceremony fails. Is that not like our battle forms? Is that not a show of discipline and strength? Ritu watched as Hanul poured the hot water in precise circles over the leaves. Steam rose in the lunar gravity, creating beautiful patterns in the artificial light. Our ancestors lived in fear, Karu said softly. They passed that fear down through generations, teaching us that we must always be the strongest, the most feared. But humans have shown us something new: the strength to remain peaceful even when you have the power to destroy. Hanul strained the tea carefully. Your people conquered 12 galaxies to prove you would never be prey again. But look at what that fear cost you. You never found allies, only subjects. You never knew peace, only victory. Ritu's scales had begun to shift from angry red to uncertain shades of blue. And you think this ceremony can change thousands of years of history? No, Hanul said, offering a cup of tea. But it can show you that there are other ways to be strong. Ways that don't require endless conquest. Ways that let you keep your pride while making allies instead of enemies. Ritu stared at the cup, then at the earth hanging in the black sky above them. For the first time, the mighty warrior looked uncertain. Your people chose to be stronger than your fears, Hanul said gently. Perhaps it's time to choose again. Ritu held the cup of tea in their massive claws, studying the steam rising from the surface. The lunar landscape stretched out around them, silent and still. Both human and Ravager ships waited in orbit above, watching to see what would happen next. If I accept this challenge, Ritu said slowly, what are the terms? Hanul straightened her back. You will learn the complete tea ceremony. If you can perform it perfectly within 3 attempts, you win. If you fail, you must leave Earth's solar system in peace. And if I win, then we admit that your weight is stronger than ours, Keru answered, and I will return with you to face the consequences of my actions. Ritu's scales shifted through several colors. You would risk everything on this human ritual. Because it is more challenging than any battle, Keru said firmly. It requires perfect control, absolute focus, and complete mastery of oneself. Are you strong enough to try? Ritu placed the cup down carefully, too carefully. Hanul noticed their claws trembling slightly. The mighty warrior was nervous about handling something so delicate. Teach me, Ritu commanded. For the next hour, Hanul guided Ritu through each step of the ceremony. The warrior's claws, designed for combat, struggled with the delicate teapot. Twice, cups cracked under too much pressure. But Ritu kept trying, their scales darkening with concentration. Other Ravager warriors had gathered to watch. They stood in silence as their leader learned to measure tea leaves, to pour water in perfect circles, to handle porcelain cups without breaking them. On the first formal attempt, Ritu broke the teapot. On the second try, the water was poured incorrectly, making the tea bitter. Now, on the third and final attempt, Ritu moved with unexpected grace. The massive warrior had learned to adjust their strength, to find balance between power and gentleness. Each movement was precise, careful, controlled. Hanul held her breath as Ritu completed the final steps. The tea was poured, the cup was offered, the ceremony was followed exactly as taught. Perfect. You have succeeded, Hanul said formally. Ritu looked at the perfectly prepared tea with wonder. I have fought in 1,000 battles. I have conquered worlds. But I have never. They paused, searching for words. I have never created something so perfect and peaceful. Keru's scales brightened, because this victory required not domination, but harmony. Not destruction, but creation. Our warriors trained for years to master our battle forms, Ritu said slowly. How long do humans train to master this ceremony? Some study for decades, Hanul answered. There is always more to learn, more ways to improve. Ritu stood, towering over the small tea table. Perhaps there are different kinds of strength, different ways to prove our worth. They turned to their watching warriors. We came here expecting to find weakness. Instead, we found a new kind of power. The tension in the air began to fade. Hanul saw Du Yun's shoulders relax as he monitored the situation from the base. The crisis wasn't over, but something had changed. A warrior culture built on strength and dominance had discovered that gentleness could be its own form of power. 1 year after the lunar tea ceremony, Newell stood in the newly built Galactic Cultural Center in Seoul. The building combined human and Ravager architecture, with sweeping metal curves meeting traditional Earth designs. Through the tall windows, she could see both human and Ravager ships peacefully sharing the sky. "The first class is ready to begin," Commander Du Yumli said, walking up beside her. He had traded his military uniform for formal diplomatic clothes, though he still carried himself like a soldier. Newell nodded and entered the main ceremony room. Inside, 20 Ravager warriors sat carefully on specially designed cushions, their scales shimmering with excitement. Beside each warrior sat a human student. On the teaching platform, Karu and Ritu waited with identical tea sets before them. "Welcome to the first official class of the Joint Cultural Exchange Program," Newell announced. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between our species." Ritu, who had become one of the strongest supporters of peace after the Lunar Challenge, spoke next. "For thousands of years, we Ravagers sought to prove our strength through conquest. Now we learn new ways to show our power, through patience, precision, and peace." Karu nodded in agreement, "And we bring our own teachings in return. The humans now learn our ritual combat forms, not for war, but as a way to understand discipline and honor." Newell watched as the class began. The Ravager warriors, once feared across 12 galaxies, now concentrated intensely on learning to handle delicate teacups. Their human partners helped guide their massive claws with gentle patience. At other times, these same humans would learn Ravager battle forms, finding strength and grace in the ancient movements. In the corner of the room, a special display showed the tea set from the Lunar Surface Challenge. It had become a symbol of how two very different species could find common ground. Below it, a plaque read, "Peace requires more strength than war." "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Du Yun asked quietly. "When you first offered tea to Karu?" Newell smiled, watching a young Ravager successfully pour tea without breaking the cup, their scales bright with pride. "I hoped. Sometimes hope is the strongest weapon we have." The news had spread across the galaxy. Other species, hearing that the mighty Ravagers had found peace with humans, began reaching out to Earth. The galaxy was changing. Where there had been fear of Ravager conquest, now there was curiosity about this small planet that had transformed the galaxy's most feared predators with nothing more than ceremony and patience. As Newell prepared to teach her own class later that day, she thought about how far they had come. The Ravagers still maintained their strength and pride, but now they had something more: the power to create peace instead of just winning wars. Outside, Earth's sun set slowly, painting the sky in beautiful colors. In orbit, human and Ravager ships patrolled together, protecting their shared peace. Inside the cultural center, two species once destined to be enemies continued learning from each other, one cup of tea at a time. Karu approached Newell, holding a steaming cup. "A perfect cup of tea, made with my own claws. Would you care to share it, friend?" Newell accepted the cup with a formal bow. "I would be honored, friend." And in that simple exchange, the future of two species continued to grow stronger, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not through force of arms, but through the simple willingness to share a cup of tea.